That red cap with "Make America Great Again" was like a red flag to a bull. Roger didn't even think twice. Such a client was simply unacceptable in his bank. 1 second to decide one sentence, and he kicked the man out. But damn, if only he had known who he was throwing out. Everything that followed felt like a lesson Roger would remember for the rest of his life. Downtown Chicago was buzzing as usual. In the middle of all that chaos stood a towering glass building, the kind of place that screamed money. Inside, Roger Fletcher, the 45-year-old branch manager, ruled his territory like a modern-day dictator. He had a thing for perfection. Every pen on every desk had to be perfectly aligned. Every customer needed to fall in line with his personal code of appropriate conduct. In Roger's mind, his word was law, and anyone daring to question it might as well pack their bags. That particular Tuesday morning started like any other. Roger was doing his usual rounds, making sure everything was as immaculate as his freshly polished shoes, and then he saw him. A man in his 50s, sharp suit, confident posture, and an air of someone who probably closed million-dollar deals before lunch. But Roger didn't notice the suit or the polished shoes. His eyes locked on one thing, the bright red hat on the man's head. It wasn't just any hat. It was that hat. Roger's jaw tightened. His perfectly curated day just took a sharp turn. The man stood in line, patient and unbothered, as if he wasn't drawing the stares of every other person in the bank. By the time he reached the counter, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Roger, of course, couldn't resist stepping in. He approached the counter, cutting off the teller mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, sir, but we won't be able to process your request," he announced, loudly enough for the room to hear. The man turned his head slowly, his expression calm but curious. "Excuse me?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "And why is that?" Roger crossed his arms, his expression so firm you'd think he was guarding the secrets of the universe. "Your hat," he replied matter-of-factly. "We don't allow political statements in this branch. If you'd like to continue, you'll need to remove it." The room went dead silent. Even the sound of fingers tapping on keyboards seemed to fade. Customers exchanged nervous glances, and the tellers looked like they wanted to disappear under their desks. But the man didn't flinch. Instead, he smirked. A small, knowing smile that somehow made Roger even angrier. "Interesting," the man said, his voice calm but laced with something that felt like a challenge. "You're refusing service over a hat?" Roger didn't blink. "That's correct. We maintain a neutral environment here." "Neutral, huh?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "All right then. Looks like I'll have to discuss this elsewhere." Roger watched as the man calmly typed something on his screen, his smirk still intact. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out of the bank, leaving behind a trail of whispers and confused stares. As the glass door swung shut behind him, Roger felt an odd mix of irritation and triumph. To him, this was just another day of keeping things in order. He couldn't imagine that this man, or his hat, could ever become a real problem. After all, what could possibly come from such a minor incident? But the quiet murmur of the customers and the tense looks of his staff told a different story. Something about this encounter wasn't sitting right. The next morning started like clockwork for Roger Fletcher. By 9 a.m., he was already in his office, flipping through reports, barking orders to his team, and sipping his meticulously brewed coffee. Everything seemed normal, or at least it should have, but there was something off. The first hint came when he noticed the staff. Usually, they were all business, moving like gears in a well-oiled machine, but today, they were whispering in corners, darting nervous glances at him, and avoiding eye contact like he had some sort of contagious condition. Roger frowned. "Is there a memo I missed?" he muttered under his breath. By mid-morning, the customers were acting just as strange. People in line kept checking their phones, sharing sly looks, and even, he couldn't believe this, snickering. Roger didn't do snickering, not in his bank. Around 11:30 a.m., the first phone call came. "Good morning, this is Roger Fletcher," he said, his tone clipped and professional. "Yeah, good morning," replied a gruff voice on the other end. "I need to talk to someone about an incident at your branch yesterday." Roger's stomach tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to." "Oh, you'll know soon enough," the caller said before hanging up. Roger set the phone down a little harder than necessary. One call wasn't enough to rattle him, but then came another, and another. By lunchtime, the phones were ringing non-stop. Customers at the counter started dropping hints. "So, did you really kick that guy out?" And, "Man, the internet's on fire today." That's when it clicked. Roger stormed into his office, slammed the door, and pulled out his laptop. A quick search confirmed his worst suspicion. The man from yesterday had posted about the incident, and it had gone viral, like wildfire viral. The post was filled with sarcastic commentary about his experience, complete with a sharp jab at Roger's creative interpretation of customer service. The comments section was a feeding frenzy. People were calling the bank out for discrimination, with hashtags piling up faster than Roger could read. And then his desk phone rang. It was corporate. "Roger," came the calm but icy voice of his regional manager. "Care to explain what's going on?" Roger took a deep breath. "It's nothing serious," he said, his voice firm. "A client overreacted and decided to cause a scene online. It's being blown out of proportion." There was a pause on the other end. "Blown out of proportion?" The manager's tone sharpened. "Roger, this post has been shared over 100,000 times in less than 12 hours. Our PR team is working overtime to contain it. I need a detailed account of what happened. Now." Roger's grip tightened on the receiver. "I didn't do anything wrong," he snapped. "The man was being provocative. I handled it appropriately." Appropriate? The word was a dagger. "Roger, this is now an issue at the highest level. Expect someone from corporate this afternoon." The line went dead. Roger slammed the phone down, his carefully constructed composure starting to crack. At 3 p.m. sharp, the door to the branch swung open, and in walked a man in a sharp navy suit, briefcase in hand. His face was unreadable, but his presence carried the weight of authority. He introduced himself as a corporate compliance officer and immediately asked to speak with Roger in private. The meeting was tense. The officer didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Fletcher," he began, sliding a file across the desk, "we've reviewed the incident. This has escalated far beyond a standard customer complaint." Roger felt a bead of sweat slide down his temple. "I assure you," he started, "I acted within policy." "Policy?" The officer's expression hardened. "Mr. Fletcher, this is now a reputational matter for the entire institution. Your actions have put this branch, and potentially the bank as a whole, under scrutiny." Roger's mind raced. He'd been in tight spots before, but this felt different. The weight of the situation was finally sinking in, but he refused to let it show. "I'll handle it," Roger said, forcing a confident smile. "The client is overreacting. This will blow over." The officer didn't smile back. Instead, he closed his briefcase, stood up, and delivered the final blow. "This is out of your hands now. You'll be hearing directly from senior management." As the door closed behind the officer, Roger sat frozen in his chair. For the first time, the cracks in his armor were starting to show. A few days later, the storm that had been brewing finally hit full force. The usual buzz of the branch was replaced with an eerie silence as a group of corporate bigwigs arrived mid-morning. They walked in with purpose, their sharp suits and no-nonsense expressions setting the tone. Everyone, staff, customers, even Roger, knew this wasn't a friendly visit. The corporate team didn't waste any time. They started interviewing staff, combing through transaction logs, and reviewing security footage. Tension filled the air like a fog. Roger, normally the one in control, found himself in the hot seat. For the first time, his confidence wavered. By the third day of their investigation, the whispers among the staff had turned into quiet speculation. Rumors flew about who the mystery man from the other day really was. Some thought he might be a journalist. Others suspected he was tied to some watchdog organization. Roger dismissed it all, at least outwardly. Internally, he was beginning to sweat, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. It was early morning, before the bank officially opened. Roger was in his office, rehearsing what he would say if corporate called him in for another chat. His thoughts were interrupted by a firm knock on the door. "Come in," he called, trying to sound composed. The door swung open, and in stepped him, the man from that day. Only this time, he wasn't alone. He was flanked by two sharply dressed individuals, their expressions as cold and unreadable as stone. Roger froze. His mind scrambled to process what was happening. The man wasn't wearing his signature hat anymore, but his presence was just as commanding, maybe even more so. "Good morning, Mr. Fletcher," the man said, his tone calm but with a razor-sharp edge. He stepped forward and casually took a seat across from Roger's desk. The two companions stayed standing, their eyes locked on Roger. For a moment, Roger felt like the walls were closing in. I wasn't expecting you," he stammered. The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made you question every decision you'd ever made. "Oh, I'm sure you weren't," he said smoothly. "But then again, surprises have a way of keeping life interesting, don't they?" Roger cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control. "How can I help you today, sir?" he asked, forcing a polite tone. The man leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "Let's cut to the chase, shall we? Do you remember me, Mr. Fletcher?" Roger's stomach dropped. He didn't answer immediately, but the man didn't wait for him to. "I'm sure you do," the man continued. "You seemed so confident the other day when you decided to refuse me service. Very bold of you." Roger felt the color drain from his face. The man leaned forward now, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "What you didn't know is that I'm not just some guy off the street. My name is Henry Williams, and I happen to own a substantial share of this bank. In fact, you could say it's my bank." The room seemed to tilt for a moment. Roger gripped the edges of his desk, his knuckles white. "Mr. Williams," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I wasn't aware." "Clearly." Henry cut him off, his tone sharp but still unnervingly calm. "You weren't aware of a lot of things, were you? Like how your actions could jeopardize the reputation of this entire institution, or how your little display of authority could turn into a PR nightmare overnight." Roger opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Henry leaned back again, his smile returning. "I must admit, though, you've given me quite the story to tell at our next board meeting. The manager who tried to kick out the owner. It has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Roger felt a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Mr. Williams, I assure you, I had no intention of—" "Of course you didn't," Henry interrupted, his voice dripping with mock reassurance. "But intentions don't pay the bills, Mr. Fletcher. Results do. And the result of your little power trip is a mess that my team has been cleaning up for days." The room fell silent, the weight of Henry's words pressing down on Roger like a mountain. He had never felt so small, so exposed. For the first time, he realized just how badly he had underestimated the situation and the man sitting across from him. Henry stood, adjusting his cufflinks with the precision of someone who knew exactly how much power he held. "I'll be speaking with the board about your future here," he said, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. "In the meantime, I suggest you take some time to reflect on your choices." With that, he turned and walked out of the office, his entourage following close behind. The door clicked shut, leaving Roger alone in the silence. The walls of his once impenetrable kingdom were crumbling, and for the first time in his career, Roger Fletcher had no idea what to do next. The meeting in Roger's office could only be described as painfully short and excruciatingly humiliating. Henry Williams, now fully revealed as the man at the top of the bank's food chain, sat across from Roger with an air of absolute control. His words were sharp, precise, and left no room for debate. "Mr. Fletcher," Henry began, his tone calm but laced with authority, "your actions the other day didn't just reflect poorly on you, they reflected poorly on this institution. Do you know what that means?" Roger opened his mouth, fumbling for words, but Henry didn't wait. "It means you've jeopardized the trust of our clients," he continued, leaning forward slightly. "And in this business, trust is everything. Without it, you might as well shut the doors and call it a day." Roger's palms were clammy as he clasped them tightly on the desk. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but Henry's sharp gaze froze him in place. "As someone who believes in freedom of expression," Henry said, his voice dropping just enough to make Roger lean in instinctively, "I find your actions particularly offensive. Discrimination of any kind goes against the core values of this company, and frankly, against common decency." Roger flinched at the word discrimination. It hit him like a slap, each syllable heavier than the last. Henry let the silence hang for a moment before delivering the final blow. "This isn't just about you anymore," he said, standing up and smoothing his suit jacket. "This is about the reputation of my bank, and I'm not willing to let someone like you damage what I've built." Roger barely managed a nod as Henry straightened, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it looked like he might say more, but instead he simply turned and walked out, leaving Roger to stew in his own regret. By the end of the day, the verdict was in. Roger was out. The official language was voluntary resignation, but everyone knew what that really meant. His desk was cleared in less than an hour, and the news spread through the office like wildfire. Employees whispered in the break room. Customers glanced around with wide eyes, clearly eager to piece together the drama. Nobody had expected the mighty Roger Fletcher, king of the branch, to fall so swiftly. The final nail in the coffin came when Henry made one last stop before leaving the building. As he passed the teller line, he placed his now infamous red cap back on his head with a slight smirk. The same cashier who had been there during the original incident greeted him with a polite smile and efficiently processed his transaction. Before walking out, Henry turned and said loud enough for the room to hear, "Sometimes, all it takes is one small mistake to reveal someone's true character." The words hung in the air long after the glass doors shut behind him. It wasn't just a lesson for Roger, it was a reminder to everyone in the room. As the day ended, the branch settled into an uneasy calm. The once imposing Roger Fletcher was gone, his office dark and empty. Meanwhile, the staff couldn't help but reflect on how quickly fortunes could change with one misstep. And Henry? He walked out with his usual confidence, the red cap on his head a quiet testament to a battle won, not with power, but with principle. What would you have done in Roger's place? Do you think he handled the situation the right way, or could it have been avoided? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know ever experienced something similar? Let's discuss. Don't forget to like this post if you enjoyed the story and share it with others. Your opinion matters, and we'd love to hear it.